Today I'm going to share with you a film which was going to be part of my doctoral film way back in 2011. But when the university reduced the film length from 90 minutes to 45 minutes, I had to edit out this part of the footage. This footage was filmed in London in 2007, and for some 13 years I resisted putting this footage on the YouTube, but I think now is the right time that I share this with you. And I'm going to start the film with my departure from Fiji for UK, and let's see. I arrived in London in the cold November morning of 1980. We drove through the width of London and arrived in Belvedere, Kent, located on the southwest fringe of Greater London. Belvedere is approximately 10 kilometers from Woolwich, where I spent most of my working and political life while living in London. Despite traveling halfway across the world from Fiji to London, my start in London was great. Within a month I found a job. A year later I became a police officer in the London Met Police. Soon after that I bought a house, and within 3 years since arriving in London, I had a daughter, I had a son, I had a couple of cars, I had a beautiful family, and life was good. As our plan was to return to Fiji within 5 years, I quickly got a job as a security officer. I worked mainly in the London city centre locations such as the St. James Tube Station and a college near London Bridge. Our daughter Priya was born in 1980, and in April 1981 I joined the Met Police as a police constable. Soon after graduating from the police academy, we had bought our own home in the well sought after Welling area just outside the boundary of southwest London, where our son Rishi was born in 1983. My downfall was perhaps more dramatic than my rise in London. It took me some 2 years to accomplish much in London, but it took less than 2 years for everything to unfold, and me losing my family, my children, my home, and my job. Cracks began to appear in my marriage, and by 1985 it appeared that the marriage could not be saved. With the end of my marriage, my plans to return to Fiji after 5 years was also abandoned. I now found myself in self-exile in London. I was informed by the Met Police that they would not let me undertake my sergeant's exams. This came as a huge blow to me, as I had studied for 1 whole year to take that exam. I realized that my career in the Met Police was heading towards a brick wall, and that I had little future in the Met Police after that. I resigned from the Met Police in April 1987. By 1987, with no one to help me in London, I was going down fast. It was time to make a decision to go down, break down, and disappear, or to fight back. I decided to fight back.
I'm Satnam Singh. I work as a coordinator at the Raivision Racial Equality Council. This is an area where Satish was living in Ilford, Redbridge, prior to going abroad to Australia. However, I met Satish probably mid-80s to early to mid-80s, where there were demonstrations of the New Mate, New Selling campaigns, and he was a police officer, as it were, on the other side of things. And I think he learned that that was not his place, and came out of the force, and we became friends eventually.
By 1991, I had a sociology degree. I was elected as a councillor to the London Borough of Greenwich Council, and in 1992 I was appointed as a Principal Race Equality Officer in the neighbouring borough of Newham, and life was getting better.
Race relations became important to me, and I started voluntary work at the Greenwich Action Committee Against Racist Attacks, which was based in Woolwich.
In 1987, things went quite bad in this borough. It was time when I met Satish Rai. It was time when the British National Party and the National Front decided to stand for election in this borough. The literature was absolutely horrendous they produced, and that was all because of the publicity what the BNP and the National Front have produced and passed in this borough. So 87, when they stood for election, there were about 400 people outside the BNP hall where they were speaking, and I remember that me and Satish had organized that mobilization of people. So this is 1987, and Satish will remember that in 1989 the British National Party opened the headquarters nearby at 154 Upper Wickham Lane. And how many pickets of the Bexley Council? I think me and Satish was involved with at least 19 pickets of the council to remove the British National Party from those premises. And I remember sometimes we've been dragged out of the meetings by the police, that we were disrupting the meetings. But that was 1989.
Studying sociology and working within the race field made me change the focus of my professional life. I wanted to change the narrative set by the Europeans about the Black and Asian people. I wanted to become the voice of the Black and Asian people. I wanted the history of Black and Asian people to be told by us.
I was never involved in the political side of things, which obviously Satish was in a big way. Even though our relationship was fairly social and a lot like I say, indulgence, drinking. But, I think it was fairly evident at the time Tish was quite a driven person, and there were. You picked up after a bit knowing him that there were things in his background, I suppose, that were bothering him and that drove him to get involved in certain areas, i.e. politics.
My name is Harper Jolene. I am Assistant Chief Executive of Greenwich Council. I first met and worked with Satish Rai in the early 90s. During this time, Satish initially was a community activist. Subsequently, Satish got involved as a councillor and went on to become one of the key members of the council, involved with the council's Race Equality Committee as vice chair at one point. And the great thing about Satish, he came in as one of 12 ethnic minority councillors at the time. When he did join the council, it was a time where there was much activity happening around race equality. There was much interest in furthering and advancing the issue of race equality. There were a lot of obstacles to overcome, and not least the active right-wing British National Party and National Front movement locally. And there were in fact a number of racist murders as well, including one of Stephen Lawrence and another in relation to Rohit Dubey, which are both very well known. So it was a time of much campaigning, much activity, and Satish was very central to all of that. He played a very big role. I think for most of us who worked in the council and were involved in some of that activity, what Satish brought was his enormous enthusiasm to the issue and his knowledge and massive commitment also to the promotion of race equality. I think what often separated him and put him at a great advantage to a number of other politicians and other people who were active locally was his ability to bridge the ethnic divide. He was one of those people who could and did relate to both the African Caribbean and the Asian community. And I think because of it, he did, and his great knowledge, he engendered quite a strong degree of trust and empathy. One of the key things Satish did when he was a councillor was to lay the foundation for what is now the very important mainstreaming of work by the council around race equality. And I always remember his great cry of policy and action planning. Policy and action planning. It was new at the time and it was innovative, but it was very important, and it laid the foundations for our current approach on this issue. So, you know, you could almost say he was 10 years ahead of his time in that regard. We worked very well together and managed to, I think, bring the issue of race equality from the margins to the mainstream of council activity. And the approach which he pursued and adopted has stood us in good stead subsequently, and it certainly helped to ensure that Greenwich Council was not only innovative but ahead of the game as far as the promotion of race equality was concerned in London and in England in general. So there's been a great deal to thank Satish for in that regard. I think the other issue which as an officer in the council I was always very grateful for Satish's support on was his great support in arguing for the promotion, the recruitment and promotion of more ethnic minority staff. It was at a time when we had very few ethnic minority staff in the council, less than 10%. And we've now got something like 28% ethnic minority staff in the council. And we've in fact got at least 20% of people at director level in the council, which is a major achievement, and I don't think probably any other council in London has that level. So I think part of his contribution there was, and a very important one, was encouraging and supporting the development of black ethnic minority staff forum. And I think what that did was ensure that black staff got together, talked together, met each other, learned from each other, supported each other, and I think that has played a big part in helping a number of us who have risen to more senior ranks in the organisation, and in some cases have gone on to other organisations as well. It has helped to support our efforts to progress as people within what are very large bureaucratic organisations where it can be very difficult to progress. So all in all, I would say that my own view is that Satish has made a very large contribution to promotion of race equality, not only in Greenwich here, but I think it's helped to set the standards and the approach across London and Britain as a whole.
And I know he was hugely, heavily involved in implementing a lot of the policies set about in racism in Greenwich and in Newham, where I was involved as a racial harassment officer. And I worked with Satish on numerous cases, on numerous incidences where we've helped rehouse a lot of Indian families who suffered racism.
Satish Rai. I've known him since 1991 now. It was actually quite. I haven't told Satish, this before, but coming to work in Greenwich was a fantastic thing for me because before I came, I found very few people who shared similar interest, the strong revulsion against colonialism and destruction of native people all over the world. People just don't seem to care anymore. As I, started to work and develop my work in Greenwich, I found Satish was consistently very strong when it comes to racism. He made a variety of efforts, many kinds of efforts, and he tried to get the community together to develop a strong response to racism.
And in January 1993, I was employed by the London Borough of Newham as the principal rights officer to develop an anti-racist victim support service to the victims of racially motivated crimes and attacks in the borough.
Hi, my name is Surinder Paul. I'm just telling you a bit of my experiences with Satish when he sort of joined the Newham Council when I first met him. I was a grants officer working in the town hall, and in the annex we had several units, and Satish was working for one of them, which was the police unit, and he had a very interesting job of being based in a voluntary organisation half the time and half the time in the council. And our sort of friendship started from there. When I first met him, he was very, very quiet, very introvert, and he kept himself to himself. But gradually, because of we had an Asian support group, we went out, from the Asian staff in the council. We used to arrange regular sort of curry nights, and eventually became a curry club. We'll go out and celebrate all the different occasions like Diwali, Christmas and Eid, and have an afternoon where all the Asian staff would get together and mingle. And then he used to live in Ilford, off Ilford Lane at that time, and then eventually he moved into one of a property which I had vacant with himself and Naesh, and our friendship grew from there. And he did some marvellous anti-racist work while he was in the council, because some very progressive ideas of anti-bullying, anti-racism, having new schemes such as a scheme called Yes, which was the youth escort scheme to escort young kids who were being bullied to school. We had a professional witness scheme whereby he was developing to encourage victims of crime to have volunteers to support them.
We used to regularly be in touch, socialising, alongside a lot of the community activities. He, I think, made quite a contribution in terms of the race issues in Newham, which is next borough along, and he contributed towards some of the cultural issues within the Asian community through drama, etc.
I met Satish about 1993, and we met through the social scene at London Borough of Newham, where a whole group of us Asian workers used to meet through what later became dubbed as the Curry Club. And during that time, Satish started in Newham, and as did I about that time, and we became very good friends. He became quite central to the social scene, and with his very charismatic, fantastic sense of humour, very, very supportive friend. We got to know him, as a valued member of the Curry Club. But one thing I realised, that in spite of his good humour and his jolliness, he was actually very, very lonely, being estranged, I suppose, from his homeland and his family in London. And in a way, I think the Curry Club members became his family.
I became involved in creative projects, and to start off with, writing a novel seemed to be the best option, and so I began writing my first novel, A Silent Cries. I journeyed through 4 continents, and I must say Nigat Khan was instrumental in getting this book completed.
He talked to me about writing a book on his experiences of his ancestors from India and his own experiences immigrating from Fiji to London, and how he came to be here all the way from India, from Fiji, and now in London. And he talked to us, to myself in particular, about writing this book. And eventually he did write the book, and he asked me to read it, to proofread it, and provide some comments, some contribution on what needed to be said, or anything that I could add to it. And I really enjoyed that process, and I know I was extremely taken aback and thankful to him, because he actually dedicated the book to me, and that was a really wonderful thought, and I really appreciate the fact that he did that.
And I remember he wrote this thesis called Silent Cries. It was then converted, or he adapted it and expanded it into a novel called Silent Cries. And I really liked the concept of looking at the history of slavery and this indentured labour system, and how people like myself have ended up in England or wherever else you may be. And it's hugely important. I see that now. And we sat down and I said to Satish, look, I worked in theatre. I think it'll work really well as a piece of theatre, as a play.
Nash was a key person, not only assisting me in converting the novel into a play. He was one of the lead actors. He was crucial in the production team, and he also assisted in direction.
Play was critically acclaimed when it was done, so it was a very, very, very proud moment to have been involved in Satish's achievements in writing the book and producing the play.
Satish, on ceasing to be a counsellor, moved away, and he got more involved on probably the more artistic side of his interests. And I do recall being invited to an event that took place in East London, where Satish had asked me to come along and launch his book, Southern Cries. And that was a very successful event. And I remember thinking, this guy is really doing very well. What I've been pleased for him in that aspect of his life, I think one of the things to say is that we, who had got used to working with him and having his support in the council and Greenwich generally, we missed him.
But what was most inspiring for me about Satish was his writing of the play, Silent Cries, and showing the play and putting the play on. And he invited me to go and see the play. So I went to Stratford, Tom Allen Centre in Stratford. And the moment the play started, I was so hooked. I couldn't believe it. It was such a good play. They managed to get good actors, actresses, good direction, good script, and the story about a group of Indian indentured laborers, leaving Calcutta, going to West Indies, Guyana, and on the other side, a group of slaves being taken to the West Indies. The whole story was so good, and I actually became very confident about Satish's ability to deliver good quality, artistic, creative works. Dealing with racism, colonization, and raising awareness in people about what happened, and encouraging people to understand the issues so that in the present and in the future similar things cannot happen. So his message is much bigger than what has been achieved in London. I can tell you that I myself have been encouraged and also received inspiration from Satish's constant and sort of unchanging position, about uncompromising position about wrongs of injustice, wrongs of colonization, wrongs of racism, wrongs of people taking over other people's land.
On the opening night of the play at the Tom Allen Center, where my book was also launched by my friend Harcourt Lane, and accompanied by another dear friend, Muhammad Ahmadullah. I sat in the back row of the theater. There were some 200 people there, and as the play started and went on, I looked closely at the audience for the reactions, and for almost the entire duration of the play, everybody were very silent, engrossed in the play. And after the play, I noticed quite a few people just sat there on their seats, some were crying, and I knew that the play was great success.
And when we were working on this play, Silent Cries, I wrote with Satish, when we performed it, it had an amazing effect on the audience. People literally sat there for 6-7 minutes after the play had finished because they couldn't move. Emotionally, they had been taken on a journey that was so true that not many people would dare bring up again,
I called the book and the play Silent Cries because of the tears and bloods of the African slaves and descendants, as well as the indentured Indians, the Girmites, and their descendants. And I thought if one person shed tears for these brave but very unfortunate people, my work would be rewarded. Just when I thought my life was on the up, that the life was good, something internally in my body began to give up. At that stage, I did not know what was happening to me. I was in my mid-30s, but whatever was happening to me, I knew it was not good, and slowly I was being affected mentally, physically.
And his personal kind of dilemma that he was going through. I saw this huge, and he's a big guy, strong man, really just crumble into a small child, and he suffered a lot. He really was going through a terrible time.
I felt though that at that time his loneliness did not disappear, although he had all this applause from people and he had succeeded. He still was very, very lonely, and but also what we didn't realise was that Satish actually was very ill, and we many of us didn't realise that, and when we did, it was hard to sort of connect this sort of larger-than-life character to someone who was not well. And I remember once when I just out of the blue got a phone call from Satish saying, "I can't drive, my doctor's just been to my doctor and he's just said, you know, you must not drive, it is very dangerous." And rushing from Greenwich all the way to the doctors up in North London, East London, and picking him up and taking him home. And I was really shocked. The fact that on being told how ill he was, and he had high blood pressure and everything was going wrong in his life, and he wasn't happy.
He went through health difficulties. Maybe we didn't quite realise that at the time. Certainly I used to wind him up and, with the macho stuff, and, probably contribute towards his blood pressure really. But so he had serious health issues, which we probably didn't fully appreciate really and realise.
Despite being confronted by these issues, I kept working hard, but as the time went by, the body began to give up more and more. I withdrew. I had little support apart from my few good friends, and during this time, when I spent a lot of time in isolation, I thought about the Girmit years. At the time, I was living in self-exile myself, away from my loved ones in London, away from my loved ones in Fiji, and I began to relate to the lives and the exiles and difficulties of the Girmit years, who lived away from their loved ones for 5 years, for 10 years, and in majority of the cases throughout their lives. And that's when I decided that I would concentrate my life on Girmit years.
But what we didn't realize is he was going through a very bad, period of isolation, living by himself. He, while as the rest of the crowd, had maybe families or friends or relations, with an extended service, family support service, and I think that had a sort of an effect on him, and also issues around his work when he was doing his studies, and which could have been quite stressful. And then his health sort of deteriorated as well, because he started getting gout, and it's a combination of factors really which we did not realize, affecting him physically as well as mentally.
And I don't think he would have survived it had it not been for close friends that I'm sure he's interviewed and talked to during the process of this. And he made a very harsh or brash decision to actually just up and go, leave everything and go to Australia, a country he'd never been to. And I think it's a move he did that really has paid off for him, because it gave him chance to, I think, re-establish himself, get himself together and become a new person again. Because had he stayed in England, I really don't think he would have survived. Because I used to, like I said, share a house with him. And there were a number of times, I think 2 times I had to call an ambulance for him. And it was not good to see.
I know that without the support of my friends, some of whom you have seen in this video, there are few more whom I couldn't get to when I was in London in 2007. They're also there, and if they were not there for me, without any other support, I know that I won't be here today speaking with you. So I dedicate this video to my friends.
Then I think the best thing he ever actually done was actually to pack up his bags and go over to Australia, so it's a complete new life. And he has maintained in touch with us, and it's good to see that he's actually recovered and going back on the straight and narrow again.
But he seems to have since calmed down and relaxed, and hopefully he's feeling better for it.
In 1995, I left my friends in London, my children, my home in UK, to come and live in Australia. I could not return to Fiji because majority of my extended family were not living there anymore. They had migrated away from Fiji to other places because of the cruise. I'm very thankful to Australia for providing me an opportunity to refocus and put together my life as best as I could. I hope I have got a few more years which I can dedicate to the Girmitians.
We very much felt a great vacuum had appeared in our lives in Greenwich without his support. Having said that, I'm pleased that he's moved on to bigger and greater things, and I do, together with a number of other colleagues, wish him all the best, and just very keen that he keeps in touch with us.
I'm grateful to Australia for giving me an opportunity to put together my life once again, so that I could continue serving the cause which I selected to do so in London, to continue to work in the creative field, an opportunity to become a filmmaker, an opportunity to complete my master's degree, an opportunity to do a doctorate, and also for looking after my health, because of which I've been able to extend my life for further 20 odd years, and hopefully I got few more years left in me, which I would like to continue to dedicate to the Girmitians, and I'm sure as I go along, I'll be able to bring to you more videos, more writings, and more films on the Girmitians of Fiji, the global Girmitians, and the families of the Girmitians in India